Hello viewers, I am Mr. Dilip Kumar Pal stands before you with a very important topic of paper number 10 of 4th semester, and the name of the topic is Proliferation of Nuclear Weapon. So far as proliferation of nuclear weapon is concerned, we'll discuss mainly its meaning. Number 2, its impact. Number 3, controlling proliferation of nuclear weapons. And number 4, challenges of proliferation of nuclear weapons. And finally, limitations for proliferation of nuclear weapons. So first of all, take off meaning of proliferation of nuclear weapon. But before I start meaning of proliferation of nuclear weapon, I want to inform my viewers that if you have not subscribed my channel, subscribe so that benefit will be yours, and recommend your friends, those who are in plus 2 first year and plus 2 second year and plus 3 first semester to 4th semester, to recommend my channel so that your friends will get benefit. And help to a person is a service to God. Let us start. What is proliferation of nuclear weapon? Human beings have developed a lot of technologies. But among these technologies, nuclear technology is a vital technology. And nuclear technology is a technology which is like a blade which has two edges. It means nuclear technology can be used for peaceful purposes. It can be used for manufacturing of nuclear weapons. So far as nuclear technology is concerned, two important factors are associated with it. One is proliferation of nuclear weapon, and other one is non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. Let us start. What is the meaning of proliferation of nuclear weapons? Proliferation of nuclear weapon is just the opposite of non-proliferation of nuclear weapon. Non-proliferation of nuclear weapon means prevent a nation not to manufacture nuclear weapon, not to sophisticate its nuclear weapons, not to manufacture fissile materials which are necessary to manufacture nuclear weapons. But proliferation of nuclear weapon means manufacture of nuclear weapons. Day by day, nations are manufacturing nuclear weapons. So, manufacture nuclear weapons or to prepare nuclear weapons is known as proliferation of nuclear weapons. And proliferation of nuclear weapons are mainly two types. One is horizontal proliferation, other one is the vertical proliferation. So what is horizontal proliferation? Horizontal proliferation means if a non-nuclear state acquires technology to manufacture nuclear weapon, it is known as horizontal proliferation of nuclear weapon. So horizontal proliferation of nuclear weapon means when a state having no nuclear weapon will try to acquire nuclear weapon, it is known as the horizontal proliferation. And vertical proliferation means when a nation which has already nuclear weapon, it will try to make its nuclear weapon more powerful, it is known as the vertical proliferation. And proliferation of nuclear weapon means nations prepare nuclear weapons. Day by day, nations prepare nuclear weapons. Day by day, nations manufacture nuclear weapons. It is known as proliferation of nuclear weapons. For example, a person has one rabbit. If after 5 months, he will have 5 rabbits, it is known as proliferation of rabbit. So, proliferation of nuclear weapon means nations prepare nuclear weapons. Nations are manufacturing nuclear weapons. Nations are preparing nuclear weapons. It is known as proliferation of nuclear weapons. And by manufacturing nuclear weapons, what benefits a nation will have? And by preparing nuclear weapons, what losses a nation will have? The first benefit is that greater international status. If a nation will manufacture nuclear weapon, if a nation will have nuclear weapon, it will have greater international status. Number 2, power to take independent decisions fearlessly. If a nation will have nuclear weapon, it can take decision fearlessly. Number 3, greater security to contain people. If a nation will have nuclear weapon, there will be greater security to its people and to its country. These are the benefits. But what are the losses? By acquiring nuclear weapons, a nation also has some loss. What losses it has? If a nation will manufacture nuclear weapons, then its resources will be diverted from social development to economic development to manufacturing of nuclear weapons. So resources will be diverted. Then number 2, adverse international reactions against nation. If a nation will manufacture nuclear weapons, other nations will criticize it. Number 3, international trade sanctions against the nation. If a nation will manufacture atomic weapons, there will be international sanctions against that nation. So we are clear what is proliferation of nuclear weapons, what are its types: vertical proliferation, horizontal proliferation. Then we have discussed what benefits a nation will have if it will have nuclear weapons, and what losses a nation will have if it will have nuclear weapons. Now discuss what impacts a nation will have if it will have nuclear weapons. Number 1, defenseless of non-nuclear states. If a nation will manufacture an atomic weapon or nuclear weapon, then nations, those who do not have nuclear weapons, they will become defenseless. Because if a nation will drop a nuclear weapon against a nation, that nation cannot do anything. So the first impact of the proliferation of nuclear weapon is that it will make non-nuclear states defenseless. Number 2, change in concept of war. By manufacturing of nuclear weapons, if nations will manufacture nuclear weapons, then the war will be on the basis of machines and not by soldiers. The soldiers will lose their importance. Number 3, war will be, a new basis of national power. If a nation will have nuclear weapon, then by nuclear weapon it will become powerful. There will be no need of having a large territory, having a large population. Number 4, a new type of peace in world. If nations will have nuclear weapon, all will try to maintain peace out of fear. So it is a new type of peace in the world. Nations will promote peace out of fear. 5th, decline of power of state. If nations will have nuclear weapons, then other nations who do not have nuclear weapons, they will become powerless. Because if nuclear bomb will be dropped, a nation cannot protect. So if nations will manufacture nuclear weapons, nations will become powerless. Then blackmail of nuclear state to non-nuclear states. If a nation will have nuclear weapon, it will blackmail, it will dominate non-nuclear states as well as world public opinion and international organizations. Then, difficult in the exercise of power. If a nation will have a nuclear weapon, it is very difficult on its part to use nuclear weapon. It will be in a dilemma whether it will use nuclear weapon or whether it will not use nuclear weapon. If it will use nuclear weapon, the nation itself will be affected. The world will be affected. So, difficult in the exercise power. By possessing nuclear weapon, a nation cannot use nuclear weapon easily. It will be in a dilemma whether it will use it or not. It is another impact. Then, nuclear weapons avoid. Nuclear nations avoid war with one another. If nations will have nuclear weapons, no nuclear nation will try to make war. They will avoid war. It is another impact. Then, process of arms control and disarmament will be speed up. If nations will have nuclear weapons, the process of arms control and disarmament will be speed up. Because if there will be nuclear war, entire world will be destroyed. Then, dangerous type of war. If all nations will have nuclear weapons, the war which will be, it will be dangerous. Then, use of overkill capacity of weapons. Nowadays, there are some nations who have such type of nuclear weapons by which they can destroy the entire world many times. So, another impact of proliferation of nuclear weapon is that if there will be war, there will be use of overkill capacity of weapons by which a nation will be destroyed and other nation will be destroyed. So these are the impacts of proliferation of nuclear weapons. Now we'll discuss the controlling nuclear proliferation. What steps have been taken to control nuclear weapons? What steps have been taken to control proliferation of nuclear weapons? Number one, NPT. NPT treaty was signed. NPT treaty was prepared in 1968. It came into force in 1970 and it strengthened in 191. The purpose of NPT treaty are three. The first purpose is to use nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. Number two, its another object is to not to manufacture nuclear weapons and not to give nuclear weapons to other nations. And point three, restrict transfer of nuclear technology to non-nuclear states. So, object of NPT are three. Number one, to use nuclear technology for peaceful purposes, not to transfer nuclear technology to a non-nuclear state from a nuclear state, and number three, reduce nuclear weapons. Number two, ABM treaty, anti-ballistic missile treaty, it was signed in 1972. The object of anti-ballistic missile treaty is that it encourages nation not to take precautionary steps for nuclear missiles. Anti-ballistic missile treaty. It means it is a treaty which advises nations that they should not take much step to make anti-missile technology. If a country will make anti-missile technology, then its opponent will prepare more and more dangerous weapon. So, anti-ballistic missile treaty, its object is to restrict nuclear nations to go for nuclear defense system with its object is to restrict nuclear nations to go for nuclear defense system which will encourage nuclear nations to make sophistication of weapons. It means if a nation will prepare a defense system to restrict nuclear weapons of other country, then that country will manufacture more and more lethal weapons. It is known as anti-ballistic missile treaty. Number 3, CTBT, Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, it was signed in 1996. It was signed in 1996. The object of CTBT treaty is to restrict nations to make nuclear tests in ocean, atmosphere and underground. If they will make tests, then they can know the quality of their weapon. So it restricts nations not to make tests underground, ocean and atmosphere. Then Start 1, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty 1. It was signed in 1991 by H.W. Bush and Gorbachev, and Start 2 was signed in 1993 by George Bush and Yeltsin. The purpose of Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty is to reduce lethal weapons, lethal nuclear weapons. So these are the steps which have been taken to control proliferation of nuclear weapons. Then we'll discuss challenges of nuclear proliferations. Day by day nations are manufacturing nuclear weapons. So what are the new challenges? The first challenge is that as nations are manufacturing day by day, more and more nations are manufacturing nuclear weapons. So there is a danger that these weapons will not be in the hands of, these weapons may go to the hands of terrorists. It is a danger. Number 2, it leads nuclear arms race among nations. By proliferation of nuclear weapons, day by day, nations are competing with one another to acquire more and more nuclear weapons. It is a very danger for the human civilization. Number 3, chances of world destruction has become more. As nations are manufacturing, more and more nations are manufacturing nuclear weapons, chances of world destruction has become more. Number 4, inability of Security Council to check proliferation. Another danger is that now Security Council of UNO is unable to protect the world from proliferation of nuclear weapons. Security Council is unable to take any action. This is another problem. Number 5, lack of leadership to check it. In the world, there is not a common leader who can take steps to restrict nations to proliferate nuclear weapons. So now we take up major limitations for the proliferation of nuclear weapons. By proliferation of nuclear weapons, more and more nations are preparing nuclear weapons, but they are being checked by some factors. First factor is disarmament and arms control. In the world, disarmament movements, arms control movements are going on, arms control treaties, disarmament treaties are going on to check proliferation of nuclear weapons. It is a check. So disarmament and arms control is a check on the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Number 2, ABM Treaty of 1972, Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. It is also a check to the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Number 3, Start 1 and Start 2 treaties. Start 1 was signed in 1972, Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty 1, Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty 2, which was signed in 1972-1979. They are also a check on the proliferation of nuclear weapon. Then INF. It was an INF treaty. It was signed in 1987 by Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev. INF means Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty wants to reduce missiles having range 1000 to 5000. Then denuclearization zone, denuclear zones. Now nations are discussing that they will not manufacture nuclear weapons in their area. So in this there are various nuclear zone treaty have been signed. Number 1 is Treaty of Tlatelolco. 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 It was signed in 67 and it wants to make Latin American area as nuclear free area. Treaty of Rarotonga. It was signed in 1985. Its objective is to make South Pacific region nuclear free area. Then declaration of nuclear free area in Korean Peninsula in 1992. Then finally, nuclear doctrines. There are also various nuclear doctrines which mention that if nations will use nuclear weapon against another, then if the second nation will retaliate, then all nations will be affected. So nuclear doctrines aware nations that if they will use nuclear weapons, then they will be in problem and the entire world will be in problem. So in this video we have discussed meaning of proliferation of nuclear weapons, its impacts, methods to control, then its challenges and limitations for proliferation of nuclear weapons. Thank you viewers. Again we will be here in another video. Till now, goodbye to all.